How did you discover non-duality? I'm not talking about a feeling that you got. I'm talking about the actual concept of non-duality. How did you hear about it? Was it from a friend, or did you come across a YouTube video, or did you read a book? Did you hear a speaker talk at an event? What was your story? Or maybe this is the first YouTube video you've ever seen about non-duality. Well, in this video, I'm going to tell you my story. But before we get into that, make sure you leave a comment below and let me know how you learned about non-duality. And stay tuned. I'm Russ Rapp, and welcome to my YouTube channel, bringing you new ways of seeing non-duality. But before I get into my own personal story about how I came across non-duality, I just want to say a couple things quick. A lot of times when speakers talk about non-duality, there's references to the idea of you, or in this case, me, is an illusion. And so anytime someone gets into talking about the story, it's like, oh, you're getting lost in the story, and that's not what non-duality is about. But I watched another YouTube video from a YouTube channel called Laverin, I think it is, L', and the video was The Matrix, the Ego, Alignment, and Enlightenment. And I liked how she presented The Matrix because I think The Matrix is probably one of the best movies that really, the essence of it is non-duality. There's a lot more to it, but it's amazing how much is crammed into a trilogy. But in Laverin's video, at the end of it, she talks about how, talks a little bit about enlightenment. So when you find yourself, when you know yourself, you search or you seek the opposite, because then in that spectrum you can find the 0 point in the middle. And that's kind of how teaching non-duality really works, because it's a negation. So in a sense you are in tune with who you think you are as an individual, and so the idea is you say, hey, maybe you're not what you think, and then in that middle ground you kind of find what the truth of reality is. And so I want to get into my story. You know, I think growing up there were a few moments where it was really caught the essence of non-duality, and those, I remember, I think I talked in one other video, I was just at my locker in high school, and there was this moment where it was like everything was peaceful, everything was perfect, and nothing could ever not be perfect, even though I was still experiencing the same thing going through high school. But you know, in that moment, it kind of points to what non-duality is trying to get at. You know, there is no non-dual moment, so I don't want you to get confused with that. There is no timeline as far as becoming more non-dual or gaining non-dual awareness, but there were some moments where it kind of hinted towards non-duality. And then in 2000, right before 2001, I was probably having a rough time, you know, in college. You know, you're learning how to be an adult. You know, I had some kind of obsessive compulsive tendencies and anxiety and different things like that. And so I was having a rough time. September 11th happened, and then after that I was kind of in a tailspin, trying to figure out life, kind of a quarter life crisis, that sort of thing. And one of my professors in my small group communication class, Sheila, she thought outside the box, she taught outside the box, and she taught our class about the Enneagram, which is a personality typing system with 9 types. I kind of touched on that in another video. But after class, I went up to her and I was like, I think I'm a type 4, even though right now I think I'm a type 5, and that's a whole other story. But she said, do you know, or do you want to know, or do you want to know? And I think she was doing it a little tongue-in-cheek, but I really wanted to know. And so I went to her office hours a handful of times after that, and in that time frame I was kind of checking out in certain ways, doing, you know, not getting enough sleep, not eating right, watching TV a lot, kind of trying to disappear. And Blind Date was one of my favorite shows with Roger Lodge. But in that time frame, I was having a rough time, so I went and talked to Sheila, and you know, I was like, this is what I'm doing. I'm not taking care of myself. And she's like, oh, okay. Do you want to do more of that? And I'm like, no, not really. So she actually wrote me a list, which I was going to grab it out of my closet. I think I still have it. a list of like 6-7 books to go check out and read. One of them was, I remember, Stuart Wilde, and one of them was, which I don't think I read right away because it's kind of a little dense, sort of. It's Ken Wilber, and the book was A Brief History of Everything. And I remember watching The Matrix around that time and kind of getting into the philosophy. And when I read Ken Wilber's book, the first one I read, I got halfway through it and I wrote it on a note, "Enter the Matrix." 'Cause I'm like, this is totally the Matrix. This is great. And I think I probably still have that note too, but I'm a little bit of a pack rat with little things like that. So I just remember being, oh wow, this is just like the Matrix, but I'm pretty sure, and I'd have to go back and check, and maybe you can check if you want to read the book, he did touch on non-duality at that point, but it was kind of just like here's these levels of development, and here's consciousness and everything, and then, oh, by the way, there's this thing called non-duality, and it's about groundless being, and encompasses everything, but it's like you can't really talk about it much. There's not much to say about it, so it's pretty brief, and it really, for me, didn't connect at the time. I didn't really give it too much thought. But that was kind of the first touch point that I had with non-duality, and that was pretty much it after that point until I think 2016. I went to moved away, but I went to have coffee with Sheila again, and kind of similarly, she'd always kind of give me ideas of things to look into, and one of the things she mentioned was Tony Parsons. She's like, check out some of his videos. I'm like, okay, who's Tony Parsons? What's this all about? And then she gave me an idea to get this book, which is called Spiritual Enlightenment, The Damnedest Thing by Jed McKenna. So if you haven't read that one, that's an excellent book. And that's really essentially about non-duality. I don't know if they even use that term, but sometimes enlightenment and non-duality are kind of interchanged. But it's the same basic idea. And so, it's kind of a similar situation when I was getting stressed out about life and kind of like, feeling that the lack of control that we all feel as human beings to some extent. And so, that was really great. I started watching, I think, Tony Parsons videos, and that was really the big introduction into non-duality. And I think at that point she also recommended A Course in Miracles. So I did, maybe that was 2015, because then I think 2016 I did the year where you do the workbook every single day. You follow A Course in Miracles, and I remember I started a Twitter account after that for the next year, and my first entry was like, what changed after I did a year of A Course in Miracles? Not a damn thing. And so the whole idea of non-duality is it's not going to change your life. You are who you are. But it's really, in a sense, a negation. It's telling you, hey, there is an opposite. And so when I make these non-dual videos, the main idea I try to get across, because I'm assuming a lot of you right there, this person right there watching this video, you're most likely, if you're learning about it, unless you know me personally, but if you're learning about it, then you probably know enough about it where non-duality essentially becomes, in its own way, a trap. And I'll probably talk about that more in detail in another video, but essentially at this point, if you're stuck with non-duality is really telling you that you're never stuck, and this moment is what is, and there's not really a moment, but you're still going to have the trials and tribulations that you're going to have, but in a sense, like Paul Hederman says, you learn how to travel lighter. And so there is some essential growth, but it's not really about growing or changing. It's about the reality of what is. And so if you are into non-duality and you're like, oh, I can't talk about the self, or there is no self, or I'm not you, or watch Tony Parsons' video, he's really good at doing this. The other side of being a non-dual guru or a non-dual follower is the script, is the self, is believing that you are reality, because your whole life, if you haven't really been introduced to this concept of non-duality, you're always thinking that there is only real, there is only this reality, I exist, and these opposite ideas were never really explained to you or told to you to even consider, because why consider the opposite? Because the opposite of everything is nothing, but there is no nothing, so I'm not even going to consider that. But when you get into non-duality, the easy way to realize that your mind is always creating duality, so you're always going to be thinking that there's dualism, you're always going to thinking that you're somehow separate than the other. And so if you're getting stuck thinking, well, you know, I'm not a self or whatever, then you have to realize, hey, there is a self, because then that's the opposite, and you can find that middle point of alignment, like Laverin said in her video. And so don't get too worried about not being a self or not being nobody or all the double negatives that you can fall into. Non-duality is what it is. And so, like I said, I want to know your story, how you came across non-duality. So make sure you comment below, because I really like seeing your comments. And until next time, peace.